Chapter 1: The Boy They Overlooked. Before the billions. Before the brand that would outlive his playing days. Before the world knew his name, Michael Jordan was just a skinny kid from Wilmington, North Carolina, with something to prove. The legend says he was cut from his high school basketball team. The truth is more humbling. As a sophomore, he was passed over for the varsity squad and sent down to junior varsity, while a taller teammate took the spot he wanted. He went home, locked himself in his room, and cried. But that disappointment lit a fire that would burn for the next 40 years. Jordan would later say of failure itself, "I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." He grew, he trained obsessively, and by his senior year he was a McDonald's All-American. A scholarship to the University of North Carolina followed, and there the world got its first glimpse of who he might become. March 1982. The national championship game against Georgetown. 18 seconds left, North Carolina down by 1. The ball found a freshman named Michael Jordan at the left wing. He rose, released, and buried the game-winning jump shot. A title for the Tar Heels and the birth of a killer instinct. Yet even then, no one imagined an empire. Jordan was a basketball player, nothing more, in an era when athletes earned modest salaries and faded quietly into retirement. The money in sports lived with the team owners, the leagues, the television networks, never the players themselves. A young man might earn a good living dribbling a basketball, but a fortune, a dynasty of wealth that would dwarf his on-court earnings many times over, that was unthinkable. In 1984, Jordan declared for the NBA draft. The Houston Rockets took Hakeem Olajuwon first. The Portland Trail Blazers took Sam Bowie second. A decision that would haunt them forever. And with the third overall pick, the Chicago Bulls selected Michael Jordan. He arrived in a struggling franchise, in a league fighting for relevance, carrying nothing but talent and an appetite that could not be satisfied. He had no business plan, no portfolio, no vision of becoming one of the richest athletes who ever lived. What he had was an obsession with winning so intense it frightened the people around him. And in just 1 year, a single decision, one he didn't even want to make, would set in motion the most lucrative partnership in the history of sports. It would begin not with a triumph, but with reluctance. With a young man who had already chosen a different path and a mother who refused to let him close the door. The kid they once sent down to junior varsity was about to be handed the opportunity of a lifetime. He almost said no. Chapter 2: The Deal He Didn't Want. In 1984, the dominant force in basketball footwear was not Nike. It was Converse and Adidas. Nike was a running shoe company bleeding money in the basketball market, laying off staff and desperate for a miracle. Inside the company, a man named Sonny Vaccaro made a radical proposal. Take the entire basketball endorsement budget and bet it all on one rookie. Not split it among several players, as was tradition. Gamble everything on Michael Jordan. It was an enormous risk for a company already on the ropes. There was just one problem. Jordan didn't want Nike. He wore Adidas. He loved Adidas. As he later admitted in The Last Dance, "I didn't want to go to Nike. My favorite was Adidas." He wanted to sign with them and never even take the Nike meeting. But Jordan's mother, Dolores, had other plans. She looked at her son and told him plainly that he was going to get on that plane to Oregon. "You're going to go listen," she said. "You may not like it, but you're going to go listen." He listened. Nike rolled out a presentation built entirely around him. A personalized shoe, a personalized line, a brand bearing his name. His agent, David Falk, had already conjured the perfect title, marrying Jordan's leaping ability with Nike's flagship air cushioning. They called it Air Jordan. The numbers Nike offered were staggering for the era. A 5-year contract worth roughly $2.5 million, about $500,000 a year, plus royalties and his own signature shoe, an honor almost never granted to a rookie who had yet to play a single professional game. Adidas couldn't match it. They couldn't even come close, and they couldn't promise him his own line. Jordan was crushed. He still preferred Adidas's style, but the deal was simply too powerful to refuse. He signed with Nike. Inside Nike, executives projected the line might sell $3 million worth of shoes over its first 3 years. If it hit that modest target, the gamble would be considered a quiet success. No one, not Vaccaro, not Falk, not Jordan himself, understood what they had just created. This was no longer an endorsement contract. It was the seed of an empire, planted by a reluctant young man and the mother who refused to let him walk away from the table. That $500,000 a year bet was about to become the most undervalued deal in business history. But for it to explode, Jordan needed a stage, a story, and a villain. And in a strange twist of fate, the National Basketball Association itself was about to hand him all three by trying to ban the very shoes that bore his name. Chapter 3: Banned and Brilliant. The fall of 1984. Michael Jordan stepped onto an NBA court wearing a bold black and red shoe that defied the league's unwritten dress code. At the time, the NBA required players to wear shoes that were predominantly white, matching their teammates. Jordan's striking color scheme broke every rule. The league took notice, and the league said no. The NBA informed Nike that the shoes violated its uniform policy and threatened a $5,000 fine for every single game Jordan wore them. For most companies, that would have been a catastrophe. For Nike, it was a gift wrapped in gold. Nike made a calculated decision: pay the fines, let Jordan keep wearing the shoes, and then tell the entire world about it. They produced a television commercial that dripped with rebellion. The screen showed the shoes as a voice declared that the NBA couldn't keep Jordan from wearing them. And as black bars censored the footwear, the message was unmistakable. The banned shoe. The forbidden shoe. The shoe the establishment didn't want you to have. To a generation of young people, nothing could have been more irresistible. Teenagers didn't just want Air Jordans. They needed them. The marketing transformed a uniform violation into a movement. And Jordan, for his part, backed up the hype with the most electrifying rookie season the league had seen in years, averaging over 28 points a game and winning Rookie of the Year. He didn't just sell the shoes, he made them mythic with every gravity-defying dunk. The result shattered every projection ever made. Nike had hoped Air Jordan might generate $3 million over 3 years. Instead, in its first year alone, the Air Jordan line generated approximately $126 million in revenue. $126 million from a single rookie's signature shoe. The reluctant kid who wanted to wear Adidas had just become the most valuable marketing asset in the history of American sport. Nike, once teetering, now had a cultural phenomenon on its hands. And critically, Jordan's contract included royalties, meaning he didn't just earn a flat fee. He earned a cut of every pair sold. The more the world bought, the richer he became, his wealth compounding with each passing year, while his rivals collected one-time checks and faded away. This was the difference that would define everything. Jordan didn't rent his fame to a company. He owned a stake in the value he created. The empire had its foundation. The money was real, and it was growing. But empires are not built in a single year of triumph. They are tested by darkness, by scandal, by loss, by the kind of pain that no amount of money can soften. And in the years ahead, at the very peak of his fame and fortune, Michael Jordan would face the worst crisis of his life. The success was almost too bright. The fall would be devastating. Chapter 4: The Darkest Year. By the early 1990s, Michael Jordan stood at the summit of the sporting world. He had led the Chicago Bulls to 3 consecutive NBA championships from 1991 to 1993. His shoes sold in their millions. He was, by many measures, the most famous athlete on the planet. But fame at that altitude carries a shadow, and Jordan's was growing darker. Reports surfaced of enormous gambling losses, high-stakes wagers on golf, accusations of debts running into 6 figures, sightings at Atlantic City casinos in the dead of night during the playoffs. The press swarmed. The whispers grew into headlines. Critics questioned his judgment. The NBA reportedly looked into his betting. The clean, soaring image that sold $1 billion of merchandise suddenly had cracks running through it. Jordan, intensely private and fiercely proud, bristled under the scrutiny. The pressure was relentless. And then came the unthinkable. In the summer of 1993, Jordan's father, James, the man who had encouraged him, who had been his anchor and closest confidant, was murdered. He had pulled over to rest on a roadside in North Carolina when he was robbed and killed by 2 young men. The loss was shattering. James Jordan was not just a father. He was the steady presence behind the icon, the voice that kept Michael grounded amid impossible fame. Some speculated cruelly that the gambling controversies were connected to his father's death, claims that investigators rejected, but which inflicted further pain on a grieving family. In October of 1993, just months after the murder and weeks before the new season, Michael Jordan walked to a podium and stunned the world. He announced his retirement from basketball. At 30 years old, at the absolute peak of his powers, the greatest player alive simply walked away. He said he had nothing left to prove and no desire left to play. Then came the move no one could have predicted. Jordan signed a minor league baseball contract with the Chicago White Sox organization, chasing a boyhood dream he had shared with his late father. He rode the buses. He struck out. He hit .202 for the AA Birmingham Barons, mocked by a famous magazine cover that begged him to quit and stop embarrassing the sport. The most dominant athlete of his generation was now a struggling minor leaguer, grinding in obscurity through his grief. For the empire he had built, this was a moment of genuine peril. An icon out of the spotlight is an icon losing value. The shoes still sold, but the machine ran on his presence, his greatness, his myth. Without Jordan on the court, how long could it last? He had walked away from the game that made him, and the world wondered if the legend had reached its end, diminished, grieving, swinging at curveballs in empty stadiums. But Michael Jordan was not finished. He was reloading, and his return would not merely restore the empire, it would transform it into something no athlete had ever owned before. Chapter 5, From Athlete to Owner. March 1995. 2 words landed on fax machines across the sporting world, sent by Michael Jordan through his agent. I'm back. That was it. No press conference, no spectacle, just a declaration that the greatest player alive was returning to the Chicago Bulls. The effect was electric. Television ratings soared, ticket prices exploded, and Jordan, hungrier than ever after his time away, set about proving the doubters wrong. What followed was one of the most dominant stretches in sports history. From 1996 to 1998, the Bulls won 3 more championships, completing a second three-peat and 6 titles in 8 years. In the 1995-96 season, the team won a then-record 72 games. Jordan won Finals MVP every single time his team won the title. But the truly seismic shift was happening off the court. In 1997, Nike made a decision that would change the economics of sport forever. It spun Air Jordan off into its own division, Jordan Brand, a standalone company built entirely around one man's name, with the iconic Jumpman silhouette as its emblem. No longer just a shoe, a brand, a business. And Jordan continued earning royalties on every product sold, year after year, whether he played or not. His on-court earnings had been enormous in their own right. In the 1997-98 season alone, the Bulls paid him over $33 million, an astonishing salary for the time. But the salary was finite. The brand was forever. When Jordan retired for the final time in 2003, conventional wisdom said his commercial value would fade. It did the opposite. Jordan Brand kept growing, generating hundreds of millions, then billions, in annual revenue, with Jordan's cut climbing higher each year, eventually reaching well over $100 million annually, more in retirement than he ever earned playing. Then Jordan made his boldest financial move yet. He didn't just want to endorse, he wanted to own. In 2006, he bought a minority stake in the Charlotte Bobcats, and in 2010, he became the controlling owner of the NBA franchise in a deal valuing the team around $175 million. For the first time, a former player, a black man who had started with a reluctant $500,000 shoe deal, sat at the owner's table, controlling a franchise in the very league he once played in. The transformation was complete. Jordan had crossed the line that separates the talent from the people who profit from the talent. He was no longer the asset. He was the owner of assets. The royalties compounded. The franchise appreciated. And quietly, steadily, the wealth accumulated into a figure that no basketball player in history had ever approached. In 2014, the milestone arrived. Forbes officially confirmed what the numbers had long suggested. Michael Jordan, the boy once sent to junior varsity, had become a billionaire, the first former professional athlete ever to reach that summit through the business he built around himself. Chapter 6: The Lesson of the Empire. In 2023, Michael Jordan agreed to sell his majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets in a deal that valued the franchise at roughly $3 billion. The team he had purchased 13 years earlier for a fraction of that figure. He retained a minority share, but the sale crystallized a fortune decades in the making. Today, his net worth is estimated at well over $3 billion. The overwhelming majority of it earned not from his NBA salary, but from the empire that grew around his name long after he stopped playing. Consider the arithmetic of it all. Across his entire playing career, Jordan earned roughly $90 million in salary. Yet his Nike and Jordan Brand partnership has paid him many times that, and Jordan Brand alone now generates billions of dollars in revenue every single year, an entire business universe born from a deal his 19-year-old self didn't even want to sign. So what is the lesson buried inside this extraordinary story? It is not simply that Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player who ever lived, though many believe he was. It is that he understood, perhaps better than any athlete before him, the difference between earning money and owning value. A salary ends when the work stops. Ownership compounds while you sleep. Every pair of Air Jordans sold in a city he will never visit, every franchise that appreciates over the years he holds it, every royalty check that arrives long after the final buzzer, that is the architecture of lasting wealth. He didn't rent his greatness for a single check. He took equity in it. And there is a deeper truth still. The empire almost never happened. He was sent down to junior varsity. He wanted to sign with the wrong company. His father was taken from him in the cruelest way. He walked away from the game at his peak and floundered in the minor leagues. At every turn, there was a door that could have closed forever. And at the most decisive one, it was his mother's insistence, not his own desire, that put him on the plane. The empire was built not on a flawless plan, but on resilience, on the willingness to listen, and on a refusal to quit through failure after failure. Jordan said it himself, in words that became as famous as the shoes. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. That is the real story of how a $500,000 gamble became a billion-dollar empire. Not luck, not talent alone, but ownership, persistence, and the courage to bet on yourself when no one else can see the empire you're about to build.